Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we're going to be continuing our discussion on the Gwenverse miniseries as we take a look at Spider-Gwen, Gwenverse number 4. So, last time on Gwenverse! So, as the Gwens continue traveling through time and throughout Earth-65's history in order to find each of Spider-Gwen's templates, they end up traveling back to 1983 to a convention where the fourth template is, specifically the one for Iron Man, or in this case, Iron Gwen, who with her in this timeline, she is basically the adopted daughter of Howard Stark. Her name is actually Tony, spelled with an I, and Howard is actually friends with Norman Osborn and they're business partners. And basically, the three of them develop the suit together, and Gwen is there to show, and Tony is there to show it off. However, in the middle of the presentation, two more members of the Terminal 6 attack: the Black Cat variant by the name of Black 13 and a Green Goblin variant called the Glam Goblin. Basically, through the combined efforts of all the Gwens, they're able to take down Black 13, but in the midst of the chaos, Norman actually does recognize them, and it turns out that Norman's kind of gotten an upgrade since the last time he saw the Gwens when he was a kid, metamorphosing into a big, buff, green goblin. As such, to try and protect himself, he grabs Tony, and with the help of the Glam Goblin, they escape, but the Gwens intercept him and bring him back down to Earth. Although it's at that point when the Glam Goblin starts kind of speaking to Norman's inner demons, and manages to convince him that that Iron Gwen is actually working alongside them, which in turn causes Norman to turn on her. Faced with no other options and with her armor rebooted, Iron Gwen wound up blasting Norman off and unintentionally killed him. And sadly, when her adopted father came and saw that, he wasn't exactly happy and essentially disowned her in his grief. Faced with nowhere else to go, Iron Gwen wound up joining the other Gwens, and Gwen is starting to realize that a lot of the actions they've been doing to try and prevent Earth-65's history from changing are instead setting things in motion, as the Iron Gwen armor only came into existence because Howard made a vow to make a proper suit of armor to protect his friend Norman, who only got hurt because of what Wolverine did in the 30 years prior when they wound up getting Captain America. But either way, yeah, things are not exactly going well, and it looks like they're not actually doing anything. In the meantime, however, there are more threads laid down in that timeline, as after all the Gwens wound up leaving, it turns out that Earth is being spied on by the Kree Empire, who decided that with the change of Norman, there's clearly something going on down there that may involve the Skrulls, especially since how Norman got his change was through extra normal means. He said it was by eating a goblin, but maybe it was something Skrull related. I don't know. Point is, the Kree decide to send in their own soldier, which leads them to create a clone with the consciousness of Captain Marvel, who basically will work for them. And of course, considering all the Gwens they saw, they decided to make the clone body in her template, resulting in the fifth Gwen that the group needs to find, Captain Marvel, which is where issue 4 begins, as we check in with the last two surviving members of the Terminal 6, Nighthawk, and I think that's her name, Nighthawk. I gotta remember. Sorry, I'm gonna go back and I gotta make sure I get her name right. It is Nightbird. Okay, Nightbird, the version of Gwen from Heroes Reborn, and Dr. Cephalopod, who are kind of zeroing in on where the final Gwen is and figuring out the best way that they can take her out. However, as they zero in on her, well, they end up getting some interference, as the Gwens themselves end up piling into the basically pocket universe that they're hiding out in, and decide to take the fight to them, as they believe that this may be the best way to save to try and stop the bad guys and make sure they don't get the last remaining Gwen. So it leads to a big superpowered brawl. But unfortunately, the Gwens are having trouble coordinating, and it's causing infighting, to the point where 3 out of the 5 Gwens are actually getting into a little argument, and the only 2 Gwens that are doing anything are Wolverine and Spider-Gwen, who both don't exactly have a good time, as Wolverine Gwen is duking it out with Dr. Cephalopod, who manages to escape her and flee into another universe, and then likewise, as Gwen starts duking it out with Nightbird, she ends up unmasking her and ends up learning that Nightbird's an alternate version of herself, which Nightbird uses to her advantage by ranting about her history, how she got a snoot full of goblin gas, how it showed her the truth, so to speak, before she closes in and actually bites Gwen. I'm not kidding. She actually bites her. Which ultimately distracts Spider-Gwen enough for Nightbird to make an escape and follow Dr. Cephalopod, closing the portal behind them. So, yeah, while the Gwens decide to be a bit more proactive this time, they really have nowhere else. They essentially failed and they have nowhere else to go. Thankfully, Spider Zero comes in and decides to lend them a hand, as she says that the pair have actually left a trail that can not only lead the Gwens to where the bad guys ran off to, but also to the final Gwen template. And of course, that is what leads us to our final one. And I think this one is in the 90s, but don't quote me on that. But basically, we end up cutting to the fifth Gwen, and her name is Gwen Jones. And much like her spider themed counterpart, she runs a band. Only in this case, they're called the Gwen Joneses, not the Mary Janes. Though there is a version of Mary Jane that she partners up with as part of the band. And like with Spider-Gwen, she of course loves being a part of the band, loves making music, is happy to go to all their gigs, but unfortunately other duties call her, and so she's not always on top of things 24/7. And of course, in this issue, it's no exception, as after a practice with her band, she ends up getting a message from the Supreme Intelligence who says that she is needed. As such, after Gwen Jones makes a quick getaway and ducks into an alley to hide her guitar, she unrolls her sleeves and we see she's got a pair of shiny bracelets on her wrist, which she bangs together and transforms into Captain Marvel. Okay, so yeah, I should probably give a bit of an explanation for this. So, once upon a time, when during the original run of Captain Marvel, with the original Captain Marvel, Mar-Vell, well, there was one point where he had a special gimmick, namely utilizing these special cosmic bracelets called the Negabands. Basically, at that point in time in the comics, Mar-Vell had been branded a Kree traitor, and so as punishment, the Supreme Intelligence wound up trapping Mar-Vell in the Nega dimension, essentially ensuring that he would never be able to get out, as basically you couldn't just come and go freely. So it looked like he was trapped. However, there was someone in the Marvel Universe who could actually help him get out, and that person was Rick Jones, who, if you know anything about Marvel, you probably heard his name in a few places, but Rick Jones is essentially he's the communal sidekick of the Marvel Universe. He's a normal guy who kind of knows a lot of extra normal people, and he's mostly associated with the Hulk, as he was there at Ground Zero when Bruce Banner got hit with was caught in the blast radius of the gamma bomb that turned him into the Hulk, and it was because of Bruce Banner's intervention that Rick Jones was able to survive all that. So yeah, Rick Jones had quite a few connections with quite a few Marvel heroes, and at one point in time, Rick Jones wound up coming into possession of his own Negabands, and he learned that if he and Mar-Vell banged their Negabands together at the same time, it would cause them to switch places, allowing Mar-Vell to return back to the main Marvel Universe, while Rick Jones would take his place in the Nega dimension. As such, it caused the two to essentially be connected for a time, but the thing is, the whole thing with the Negabands is a temporary solution at best, because, well, like I said, in order to use them, Rick and Mar-Vell would have to just keep constantly swapping places, and Mar-Vell was not interested in stealing Rick's life. So while they were always connected, they were always constantly trying. While they were connected for a time, eventually Mar-Vell would always swap back with Rick again, and for a while, essentially, Rick Jones was Mar-Vell's civilian identity, so to speak, until he escaped from the Nega dimension proper. And I'm probably getting the name wrong. I don't think it was the Nega dimension. Again, I only know about this by reading the Death of Captain Marvel trade paperback, so I may be getting the names wrong. But the point is, for a time in the Marvel Universe, Rick Jones and Captain Marvel were connected by those things. And basically, Gwen Jones is doing a similar thing. Except in this case, rather than having Captain Marvel be in another plane of existence altogether, his consciousness is essentially living in her body. And in order for them to swap places, Gwen just has to smack the Negabands together, and she swaps places with Captain Marvel. And so yeah, that's exactly what's happening here. Although, of course, since we read the last issue, we know that she's not a normal person, and that Mar-Vell is an unknowing sleeper agent, because yeah, it is meant to be the original Mar-Vell's personality. So much so that he does recognize that remembers that she was originally a guy, and that she's living inside the body of this human woman. So yeah, it's kind of a big thing. But either way, I'm getting off topic. The point is, this Gwen is Captain Marvel, and they're borrowing the Rick Jones gimmick. Rick Jones gimmick, even though neither personality is aware they're actually a sleeper agent. The point is, though, Captain Marvel Gwen is just continuing doing the superhero duties, helping people, saving lives, and unbeknownst to her, this is also she's the Supreme Intelligence's puppet. And so while she is doing all these heroic deeds, unknowingly to her, the whole purpose for her being on Earth is to ingratiate herself with Earth society and essentially gather intel for the Kree Empire so they can eventually attack and invade Earth. But we'll put that aside for now, because the Supreme Intelligence has a mission for Mar-Vell. As one of Mar-Vell's old enemies, Yan-Rog, has attacked the Daily Bugle building and is holding all the staff hostage on top. As such, Mar-Vell, kind of having a grudge against Yan-Rog, as apparently in this timeline he was the one that killed Mar-Vell, just ends up flying in and gets ready to kick ass, but Yan-Rog has a ace up his sleeve. You see, he has a machine on standby who's, I'm not even gonna look it up. Basically, let's just call it the MacGuffin machine. But basically, it's meant to be it's a Deus Ex Machina whatever that allows whoever utilizes it to replicate any bit of Kree technology in the Empire's storage. And sure enough, he uses the machine on the Daily Bugle employees, and all of them end up getting turned into mandroids, which immediately begin attacking Captain Marvel. However, it's at this point when Spider-Gwen and the Gwenvengers, as we're calling them, show up, and, well, Yan-Rog exposit about how important this machine was, so they just start wrecking it, with Wolverine and Thor-Gwen leading the charge. So, things are going well, but once the Gwens start turning their attention to the mandroids, that's when Captain Marvel has a problem, because, the mandroids still have innocent people inside them, so as such, Captain Marvel ends up blasting all the Gwens and stops them from hurting him before the mandroid technology can eventually wear off. So yeah, things are already getting to a rocky start, and it's not made any better by the fact that as this is all going on, Nightbird and Dr. Cephalopod are standing on the sidelines just letting it all happen. And basically, Dr. Cephalopod has decided that he thinks he has a means of taking down Captain Marvel Gwen. Because, well, the thing about the finalizer is that part of the technology that made it, as we learned last issue, what did come from Dr. Cephalopod's own research from Dr. Cephalopod's own research. And the thing is, the reason why Dr. Cephalopod looks like a fucking octopus is because, well, he actually did research into the great old ones, like Cthulhu and all that crap. And basically, by utilizing that technology, it allowed him to kind of create several shadow selves, so to speak, which were what were put into the finalizer, and eventually would go on to become the various Gwens, as they intercepted her and took her image. And the thing is, in order for each of these shadow selves to become the heroes that finale wanted them to be, all of them had to be preloaded with a few added details about their histories, the people they would know, the experiences they would live through, and so on and so forth. And as a result, Dr. Cephalopod does kind of know quite a fair bit about the Gwen variant of Captain Marvel, and he shares this information with Nightbird. And, well, Nightbird knows exactly what to do with it. As such, it's at this point when Nightbird comes in and manages to directly get in It's at this point when Nightbird and Dr. Cephalopod enter the fight themselves, and so basically the superheroes and supervillains while Dr. Cephalopod is duking it out with the other four Gwen variants, Spider-Gwen tries rushing in to stop Nightbird, but sadly Nightbird manages to get up close to Captain Marvel. And at first Captain Marvel wants to know who the hell this person is and what's going on, of course sending the Daily Bugle staff off once they're cured, what I love too. Even Jonah loves Captain Marvel here, so that's fun. But ultimately, this is where Dr. Cephalopod's plan comes in, as Nightbird, well, she ends up giving Captain Marvel the information she just learned via a psychic link. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, she does it psychically, and it turns out she reveals to Captain Marvel what her real role is. That in reality, she's not the consciousness of of the original Mar-Vell in a random human's body. It's a copy of Mar-Vell's consciousness thrown into a human clone body. And about how, again, about how, like I said, she's a sleeper agent for the Kree Empire so that they can eventually invade Earth. Something that sends Marvel into a bit of an emotional spiral. And basically, as Nightbird laughs at this and talks about how it's like how you finally see it, how you learned you're a puppet in someone else's game, and how this is all just one big joke. Spider-Gwen finally says that she's had enough of this shit and swings in and starts duking it out with her Heroes Reborn counterpart. Unfortunately, though, in the midst of Marvel's a bit of, well, self-discovery, as we'll call it, the Kree realize there's a bit of a destabilization in her negabands and want to try and help her, but Marvel is just done listening to them. She's realizing they lied to her and ends up causing a severe feedback right to them, which ends up shorting out their systems and knocking quite a few Kree scientists back. In the meantime, though, back on the battlefield, as Spider-Gwen and Nightbird continue arguing, again, I think it's Nightbird. I would be very much upset. It's still Nightbird. Nightbird begins mocking Gwen as Gwen at this point is now just so sick of everything that she stopped holding back, and Nightbird even kind of starts congratulating her, talking about how it's clear that the one person she hates more than everything is herself. And as Gwen tries going in and even manages to grab Nightbird's neck, Nightbird ends up grabbing her wrist and even says, "Oh, did I strike a nerve?" Unfortunately, though, for Nightbird, I have to remind you, Gwen's suit is a symbiote. And it turns out the symbiote's a little confused that there are two Gwen Stacy's right now. As again, you have to remind you, Nightbird is not a template variant of Gwen like all the other ones. She is indeed from another universe. And as a result, Gwen's suit mistakes Nightbird for its host. And so a bit of the suit ends up clinging to Nightbird, and it detects that something's a little loopy. Because I have to remind you, the reason Nightbird is as insane as she is because she got infected with a good dose of goblin gas, and well, the suit's realizing that something is in here driving her nuts, and it purges it out. And so as a result, after those little bits of the symbiote return to Gwen, Nightbird suddenly has clarity for the first time in a while, and she's brought back to the realm of sanity. Unfortunately, this thing happens too little too late, as back with Captain Marvel, her negabands are reacting violently, and their power output is all over the map. While the Kree scientists realize that something is wrong and say maybe they need to stabilize them, the Supreme Intelligence ain't having any of that shit. Captain Marvel just told them all to fuck off and defy the Supreme Intelligence. If anything, he wants to make these things overload faster, and so, as a result, yeah, Captain Marvel realizes that the negabands are going to blow, and a lot of people are going to die. As such, Marvel flies to the sky, and, well, he does end up apologizing to Gwen Jones, who can hear everything, but Gwen Jones is okay with what he's going to do, because, well, if they don't do it, a lot more people are going to die. And so, Marvel flies as high into the sky as she can, singing one of the Gwen Jones' song, before she and Gwen Jones say goodbye, say it was an honor working with each other, and the negabands explode right over New York, which, yeah, going back with the other Gwens, they end up taking out Dr. Cephalopod off panel, or at the very least Wolverine stabs him in the chest, but, yeah, that was the plan. Dr. Cephalopod sent that Gwen into they wanted to send that Gwen into emotional turmoil, and, yep, she was the only Gwen that they managed to kill. And as a result, yeah, things are going terribly. And while Dr. Cephalopod has a massive hole in his chest, he's still laughing because he's still kind of got the win. Not made even worse by the fact that the explosion caused from the negabands isn't just a simple boom and she's gone. No, the explosion continues growing over New York, and even the Gwens quickly realize that these things even they won't be able to escape it, and it's going to annihilate a good chunk of the city. And with Nightbird herself, now back to the realm of sanity, apologizing because she kind of got the ball rolling on this. However, before any of the Gwens can be pulled into the fray, they're each hit with cosmic webs and pulled back into a portal back to Loomworld, or more specifically, the Web of Life and Destiny. And as they're falling through, yeah, we finally see all the building blocks for Gwen's altered present finally falling into place. Basically, from the perspective of everybody in New York, or anyone who survived, it looked as though Captain Marvel intentionally blew herself up to kill everyone, and as a result, which, not knowing the fact that if she hadn't done what she did, then a lot more people would have been killed. So as a result, public opinion towards superheroes began taking a downward spiral. And, well, and as a result, it's what led to the Marvel laws being put into place, which I kind of find it a little darkly ironic that they were named that because of what happened with Captain Marvel. And then likewise with the public now not knowing where to go, well, they start turning their attention to old gods, which I might have mentioned this, I might not have, but something that you may have noted, but something that we saw in issue 1 of Spider-Gwen Gwenverse was that around the city were statues of Norse gods, like Odin, Loki, and so forth. And basically, yeah, with the public not knowing where to turn, they wound up looking to those old gods for worship. In the meantime, though, in the midst of the Marvel laws, any superheroes that still remained either were taken down or had to retire. And unfortunately, and as a result, with the Marvel laws continue straining everything, well, policing these types of laws became a lot more of a problem. And so while Oztech came in, and essentially helped to rebuild, well, they also provided the police with the augmented suits that we saw George Stacy wearing in issue 1 to basically allow them to continue helping to try and continue instituting the Marvel laws while also attempting to, fix as a side effect, also kind of distancing the officers within the suits even further from the people they're supposed to protect. And as a result, yep, this is what directly leads to Gwen's present. And so, yeah, as the Gwens are finally finished seeing all this, they arrive back on Loomworld in the midst of the web of life and destiny, and tied up in the middle of it is Spider-Zero, who's doing everything in her power to keep the web from going taut. Because, it turns out that Gwen was right. All of their actions throughout the story were in fact all tied together. And while Spider-Zero hadn't been able to figure it out, and while Spider-Zero did begin figuring it out a little bit at a time, she still wanted to help Gwen because she knows what it's like to lose her world. Since, again, we already know that Spider-Zero is the last survivor of a dead universe. So she wanted to help Gwen in any way she could, even though it slowly began dawning on her that the reason why the web was starting to get as tight as it was because of their actions, and yet she still wanted to help her anyway. However, and so it's basically, she's literally the only thing keeping it all in place, because they cannot keeping it all in place, but at the same time, she can't sever any of the new threads because it's all connected to the web. And if anything goes wrong, the web goes. And as we established, and they can't let that happen again. But there is still one thread that they could pull on. Something that if they want to fix all this, they can take advantage of it. And that something is, well, a final assault. Basically, this is basically, with everything now clear to Spider-Zero, she knows the one thing they should hit. The one thing they probably should have hit from the beginning, but now the one thing they should have hit from the beginning, but if they want to face this, they'll have to work together. And so the comic ends, we cut back to the end of time, with Finale having her little argument with Irma that we saw last issue, only this time around, after Finale talks about how nothing exists until someone sees it, a portal opens, and from it come all 6 Gwens, including Nightbird, who's on their side now, as they get ready to take the fight to Finale and whoop her ass something fierce. And so, yeah, that's where the comic ends. So, thoughts on this issue? Again, it's alright. It's decent. It's alright. It's decent. This one, I don't really have any more questions regarding how all of this works, so to speak. If anything, it actually explains more about how the Gwens came into existence and about how the Finalizer works. That basically each of them are technically shadow selves, so to speak, created by Dr. Cephalopods, ancient Yith technology, as he calls it. And I said Yith, not Yif. Yith. TH. But basically, by utilizing that technology, he was able to just preload settings into each of the shadows, which eventually had to take on a form and personality based on whoever was used as the template. And so that's what, of course, led to the other Gwens being created, having them get implemented through history, and yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. Point is, it did go on to further explain all that. But what I find interesting about this story about this issue is the fact that we actually do see, is that we see the Gwens kind of trying to learn from past mistakes by trying to end the threat by taking out the last two members of the Terminal Six. After all, in all their journeys, they took out all the other four members one by one. They disassembled Fossil. They shish kebabbed Roachman. They got Black 13 and the Glam Goblin trapped in the 80s, and they're most likely have been arrested, so, it sucks to be them. And so the only ones left are Nightbird and Dr. Cephalopod. But the thing is, because the Gwens are still kind of infighting because of their own personal issues, they're not exactly working as a cohesive unit. What I love is that after Dr. Cephalopod and Nightbird end up ditching the Gwens after they win their respective fights, the only two Gwens that aren't fighting, Spider-Gwen and Wolverine, are the yellow ones that actually are talking civilly, with even Wolverine pointing out, yeah, it's kind of hard to work together when all of you don't really like when all of us are the one person we don't like. I kind of like a bit of that self-aware humor. It's fun. But by that same token, I kind of like how this issue really starts delving a bit more into other darker places. I mean, we already got that a bit with some of the previous issues, but this is one where the heroes suffer kind of a bigger loss this time around. Like, in this case, the Captain Marvel template, the Captain Marvel Gwen, she dies. Yeah, this is something I did not expect when I read this comic. I fully with the way the story went about, it seemed like that ultimately you could follow what was going on in the story. Gwen and whatever other Gwens that she grabbed would travel to some other point in time and find the Gwen template that was there, messing with history. They would let her know what the situation is, recruit her to their army. They might have to battle some supervillains. There'll be some heartache here and there as they end up clashing, or something occurs that results in them having to kind of tragically say goodbye to everything they know and love. But they save the Gwen and add that Gwen to their team. But for Marvel, that's where things immediately go wrong. As in this case, because the ones that are trying to get the Captain Marvel template are probably two of the smartest members of the Terminal Six, they actually managed to implement a plan to take her out. It succeeds, and it's not through brute force. They don't kill the Captain Marvel Gwen by duking it out with her or overpowering her. They break her spirit. They show her the truth of her existence. And I don't mean that in the sense of the whole, they showed her that she was a shadow template that was created in Gwen's image. No. They show her that she is a sleeper agent for the Kree, that her mind and body are ultimately just tools for a higher power to utilize to hurt the people that she wants to protect. And that revelation ends up causing a destabilization in her powers, and as a result of that, when the Kree realizes something's wrong because she just told them to screw up, they decide, you know what? Fuck her. Let her die. We don't care anymore. And yeah, the plan works. The Negabands overload. Captain Marvel blows up, and a lot of people die. It's probably kind of a big WTF moment, because this is very much a large departure from what we've been seeing in all these previous issues. I mean, yes, last issue we did get a bit of tragedy with Iron Gwen as she had to kill her father's best friend, and ultimately in her father's grief, like I said, he essentially told her to get lost, and that was sad. I will not deny that. But even then, they still attained a victory. A hollow victory, yes, but a victory. They stopped the bad guys and saved the Gwen of that time. But then you get to Captain Marvel here, and ultimately, while they end up taking down the last two members of the Terminal Six by stabbing Dr. Cephalopod in the gut and bringing Nightbird back to the side of the Angels, hold on one second. Sorry about that. But yeah, like I said, while they do end up bringing Nightbird back to the side of the Angels, again, the whole point of them being here was to try and save Captain Marvel Gwen / potentially recruit her to their team. And not only did they fail spectacularly, but a ton of people died. And the events that happened in this timeline are what directly lead to what Gwen saw when she returned to Earth 65 in issue 1. Put simply, everything was connected. And by Gwen going on this mission and trying to gather all of her alternate selves, they essentially helped ensure that the timeline that we saw in the beginning would happen. And what I like is the fact that the only reason that Spider-Zero kind of let this happen, despite the fact that she was little by little learning the truth, though I think it's implied that she knew from the start. The thing is, like I said, she sympathized with Gwen's plight, and because after all, like we showcased in the previous Spider-Verse miniseries, she is the last survivor of her world. And regardless of how much Spider-Zero would want her world back, it's gone, it's erased, just dead, non-existent. And the thing is, by virtue of Gwen being reincarnated and her entire history being rewritten because of that, she essentially lost her world too. Earth 65's entire timeline got unwoven and then rewoven into a different pattern. And so any trace of the world Gwen knew is gone, with only the faintest of echoes there. She had nothing to return to, and Spider-Zero sympathized with that, wanting to help her despite the fact that going on this mission is what helped ensure that timeline in the first place. And we even showcased that what they're doing has made everything worse, because when all of the Gwens return back to Loom World, they see Spider-Zero tied up in the strands of the web, just doing everything in her power to hold it taut and keep it from settling. So yeah, basically, yeah, things just went from bad to worse this time around, and ultimately it was all the Gwen's fault. It wasn't them existing in this timeline that caused the world to go nuts. It was Gwen's attempt to try and fix everything that led to that. So yeah, it's kind of a bummer, and definitely can leave you a little shaken. And yes, like I said, there did get like a little victory with getting Nightbird back, because Nightbird, yeah, she fills the role of the sixth Gwen on the team, as she is as she does end up helping the team out, and she basically tries going back to being a superhero now, especially since now that she's gotten her switch flip back to sanity, she starts realizing, okay, I did a lot of bad things I need to kind of fix now. So, but that's by that same token, but like I said, that's not what they were there for. And I have to remind you, Nightbird is not a temporal variant of Gwen. She's a she's an alternate version from a parallel universe, like a universe that's dead now, unfortunately, but she is from another timeline. And so, yeah, they saved her, but that doesn't do jack shit for what their main mission was. So, yeah, one step forward, two steps back. So, and basically, like I said, by having the issue end with such a heavy loss of not just a Gwen, but of an entire city, a loss of which has resulted in such a superhero fearing world that things just continue going downhill. Yeah, it's definitely a shocker, because now you're kind of wondering how they are going to fix this, as it was the events of this miniseries that led to that altered present in the first place. And so like with all good stories, they're given one last shred of hope. They're told that if they want to fix this, they need to go to the source. As now that Spider-Zero has gotten a better grasp of what's going on, she knows that there is one place on the web that could potentially put everything right, and that means they have to go and take Finale down in person. No more proxies, no more jumping around the time stream. They got all their Gwens, they need to take her down, and they need to do it together. So at the very least, it does get you more hyped for the finale. So I guess in that regard, issue 4 is still good. It's still good. What kind of holds it back, in my opinion, is it mostly is just, again, there's some kind of issue with the bickering, as at this point you feel like the Gwens would have a better repertoire, and there's really no character growth for any of them, as nothing really feels like that they advance. Again, they're just there to be the templates, so to speak. I feel like we should have more expansion on that. But like I said, yeah. But ultimately, it's still good action. It's a nice twist to actually see the villains kind of succeed at what they were doing, even though they were taken down as well. It creates a dour mood seeing the heroes suffer such a heavy loss with what happened to Captain Marvel, Gwen, and by extension New York. And ultimately, by the end of the story, does make you wonder how things are going to turn out, but does, like I said, give you a sliver of hope that lets you know that the fight is not over yet. So, on the whole, it's still a decent issue, and I enjoy it. And I think I did kind of enjoy it. So, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson. I hope to see you on Saturday as we wrap up not only the Gwenverse miniseries, but the Spider Zero era as a whole. So till then, I hope you have a good Thursday, and as always, take care.